Afternoon and welcome to today's HCEA webinar, Disruption versus Innovation, 5 Trends That Will Make or Break Your Healthcare Marketing. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes for everyone in attendance today. First, all phone lines will be muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question during today's presentation, you are encouraged to type them into the chat box. We'll be collecting questions to be addressed at the end of the presentation. Second, if you have any questions or problems during this webinar, please email us at info@hcea.org. And now I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, David Safe, self-proclaimed Chief Investigator at GES. David is officially the EVP of Strategy and MarketWorks at GES and an HCEA board member. David, I now pass the presentation over to you.
Thank you very much. And let me clarify, not exactly Chief Investigator, though if you guys don't behave on this call, I'm going to investigate you all. No, Chief Instigator, but that's all right. I'm very excited to be presenting and sharing some thoughts with you. For those of you who are on the webinar, I am monitoring chat. And if you look down at the little menu for this webinar and you click on the chat, the box there, I have posed some questions to you. So I would love to know the answer to my question. I won't even tell you what my question is because I want you to go find the chat and go give me some thoughts about what is affecting your world. So with that, I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about what I think are some key trends that are affecting healthcare marketing. And I just want to make one note that most of what I'm going to share with you today is healthcare, right up the alley of healthcare. I have shared, and I will mention some non-healthcare instances, and the reason why I'm going to do that is because there are some things that are happening in other worlds or adjacent worlds in which I have some either knowledge or through the different interactions I've had with people in the industry, I have some reason to believe that will affect your healthcare marketing and healthcare programs as well. And I do know, having looked at the pre-registration list for the webinar, that we do have a good mix of industry partners and association members and corporate members. And so you're going to see a mix here of different trends and take-on trends affecting, or what I think are affecting those different groups. So just want to reiterate that I love to see questions and I love to see chat. So please feel free to use that function. I haven't seen any input yet, but I'm waiting. I'm excited. I want to see your ideas. But let's get going. So first, I love this quote from George Patton. If everyone is thinking alike, somebody isn't thinking. And so part of, I think, having an opportunity like this to present on different trends that are affecting our world is to allow you to step away and think bigger picture, what's going on, what could I be doing differently, how can I take advantage of the trends for the success of my program. So this afternoon, we're going to focus on 5 different trends: everything digital, remote connections, the Internet of Things, regulation and risk, and the intelligent event. These aren't the only trends that are out there, but I think they're the trends that I think we need to keep our eye on because they're changing the nature of how we're planning and how we're executing at our conventions, and as you'll see in a few minutes, what we're doing in and around the physical event with some of the virtual or the digital. So let me just dive in here on everything digital. You know, there was a time about 5 to 8 years ago, maybe more, 5 to 7 years ago, where people talked about virtual, that events are going to go virtual and that will replace the physical. And there have been various iterations of this conversation, probably for the last 50 years. They've accelerated in the last 15. I think that there are some trends that are pointing towards a more holistic approach to events that includes the virtual, includes the online, and includes the physical. I would also argue, by the way, it's going to include the off-campus, meaning just being at the education sessions, the technical sessions, the poster areas, and the show floor is not enough, and we need to think about what are the other interactions that are happening. But this section is really going to talk about virtual and digital. And there's increasing interest in reaching remote attendees. I'm going to talk about that in the next section because we have a specific area on that. But what's going on in the virtual space? Silicon Valley is knocking, and that's a really interesting dynamic in our industry. And let me just say this: not a lot of people know this. It's something that we picked up on because of some of the relationships and the discussions we're in. But it's something that I want you to be aware of. Will it disrupt the physicians getting together? Not clear. Will it disrupt the administrators, the technicians, the nurses? Very possible. So I will share what I mean by Silicon Valley is knocking. Social is way beyond posting regularly, and thinking about tools to optimize digital recruitment. I'm thinking a bit more about the organizers here, but even for the corporate members, I know that you run a number of events or you participate, whether it's symposia or other small meetings of your own, and some companies do run training sessions or customer events as well, and so we can talk about that, those opportunities. And then really I want you to step back and think broader about how to extend the event way beyond the campus, and also show you some of the ideas that are happening out there. So, virtual events. So the virtual meeting industry does exist. It has not entirely disrupted the healthcare world. What I find very interesting these days is many of the major meetings, so you've got RSNA here where they are offering CME credits and extended access and valuable content through a virtual platform. HIMSS is doing the same thing. Many events now are providing a virtual add-on to their event. And so if you are wondering whether your events are doing this, it's definitely worth a conversation with the organizer. I think the organizers look at this in two different ways. One, I want to make sure that I am providing an opportunity for those people who simply cannot make the meeting. And two, there is a segment that is either unwilling or uncomfortable with taking the time and energy required to go to the physical event, and they want to engage in a virtual event. Now, I'm going to share with you some other more tactical ideas that are more compressed, but I think it's important that we all look at what's going on in the virtual space. How can we extend or reach new relationships? And frankly, some of those relationships may be as good as we get because those people will not come to the event. Now, having said that, for the associations, I look at virtual as an attendee acquisition strategy, an opportunity for you to reach an audience that may not come, but also is wondering what is the unique proposition you have at your physical event. And so this is a teaser and a way to get involved and a way to participate. And then if they see the value and they see some unique interactions and Q&A and case sharing, that they participate in that. So different things happening in this space. I think the key is making sure you're really keeping the pulse on the organizers about whether it's your attendee acquisition strategy or sponsorship strategy, but also from a corporate standpoint, how do you extend your reach, especially when you're going to be at this event and you're going to have people who may not be able to make the event from your own staffing standpoint, and you may have an opportunity to interact online. Now, this is a little bit more, maybe it tilts to the association space, so let's tilt to the exhibiting space. And I'm showing you a non-healthcare example, but in the bottom left-hand corner is actually Pfizer Oncology, which is a healthcare example. So I just want you to know this isn't a non-healthcare trend. There are a number of companies that are replicating their physical exhibit into a virtual space where folks can go online to visit that booth, and the booth literally will provide landing pages and or interactive experiences with the associated collateral for that company. This is not Philips Healthcare, this is Philips Lighting, in which they had 13 different divisions they brought into a booth at their major lighting show. And in addition to the physical exhibit at the lighting show, they created an online replica of the exhibit where you could go to each of the 13 different divisions and understand what their offerings were and understand what the differences were and collect collateral from Philips Online. Pfizer Oncology, slightly different take. This is about explaining their product and explaining about the research that they were doing and explaining about the indications that the products were addressing. But a very similar type of experience. It looks like an exhibit and it feels like an exhibit, and there are buttons that get you to the collateral. There are some companies that will expand into online engagement. For the most part, people are doing an interactive version of the on-site exhibit. And again, I encourage you to think about what is all the discussion and all the interactions that might be taking place online by people who either can't make the event or people who are intrigued and collecting information pre-event and post-event, and it gives people a glimpse of where you're going with your presence. Now, the online marketplaces. This is a really interesting dynamic. For those of you who are pharma, and I know who you are, some of you. I know you're going to shake your head and say, this doesn't apply to us, and I will agree this doesn't apply to you for right now. But in the dental space, in the veterinary space, and some of the other healthcare spaces, even arguably technology, I want you to be aware of this trend. What you're looking at, which is Live, Love, Spa, that's actually, you can see the logo, it's a company called Balloon. Balloon provides a 360-degree marketplace for buyers and sellers online. It is a mashup. I've talked to Balloon, and they just spoke this summer at the Transform event where they presented a case study with Toy Fair International. I want you to mash up Facebook with LinkedIn with Amazon. That's what Balloon is. And what Balloon does is it creates this online space for companies to open up a storefront, to list and transact products, and to participate in conversations. Now, you're looking at a spa event here, and the other example I'm going to give you is Toy Fair, but what's really interesting about Balloon is that Balloon is creating this online marketplace, and they're recruiting qualified buyers for the toy industry, for example, into the marketplace. So if you are not a buyer, you do not get access to this marketplace. Unlike Facebook, where you can join and just friend with people, you can't do that in a Balloon site. And Balloon is usually white label for somebody else. Secondly, as a supplier, you also are pre-qualified. So these are two pre-qualified groups, the buyers and the sellers. And the sellers are setting up the storefront, they're offering product and they're transacting product, and the buyers are able to stroll and shop. And what's very interesting about both these groups is that Toy is creating the platform for this to take place. It has many more suppliers on Balloon than it does on the show floor. And what they actually did this year was they introduced for participants in their February Dallas meeting the opportunity to become I believe, a free or significantly reduced member of the Balloon marketplace for the first 6 months, and then it's a monthly subscription. And on the buyers, they have many more buyers who are on the marketplace than are at the physical event. And for both buyers and sellers, Toy is using this as a way to recruit additional attendees and additional exhibiting companies. Now, I am not endorsing Balloon. I have no connection to Balloon. I'm intrigued by the platform. But what I can tell you, and the reason why you see these other labels here, is that they're not the only people looking at this space. They realize that the events that attract exhibitors and attendees, these kind of closed events where you've got this exclusive audience, can be very valuable marketplaces. I know from some of the research and the work that I've done that events like New York Dental is a big selling show. And so for New York Dental and for some of the other healthcare services or healthcare product companies that are not heavily regulated the way pharma and med device straight up the alley may be, this is an interesting play on how to extend your reach, push into 365, 24/7 space, and help recruit the online audience or the online participants into the physical and back again, the physical into the online. And I think we're going to hear more of this. I think, there's a couple of years ago, LinkedIn was looking at our space from a content perspective and expansion perspective. There have been other folks who have established platforms trying to get in, but I've heard in the last 8 or 9 months that Silicon Valley is looking at the richness and the success of the event space, and they're thinking about what platforms they could use to disrupt or at least significantly change the conventional exhibition or trade show. Social registration. Now, this is going to skew a little bit towards associations. It also can skew towards the events run by corporates. But under a conventional model, people have used email and direct mail and ad placement to recruit attendees. In the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen social tools. And what these social tools do is typically 3 or 4 things. One, they use, and you see in this bottom left-hand corner, they use the buttons of the social media platforms like Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook for prospective attendees to register for the conference. So instead of plugging in David and Safe and my title and such, I click on LinkedIn, and the fields of registration are pre-populated. So these social registration tools, this happens to be a tool called Glean In, they pre-populate the registration form. But the other magic behind this is that these tools are conducting analytics and algorithms on someone's network my LinkedIn network, my Facebook network. The tools will then proactively suggest other people in my network who they think would be a good fit for their conference, given the professional profile and the interest of my network. And so they'll prompt me to either tell my network that I'm going, or literally click on icons and invite colleagues of mine who the algorithm has determined would be a good fit for the conference. In many cases, these tools also will layer on a kind of icons or thumbnails of the different attendees who have registered onto the homepage of the conference. As we all know, you're more likely to register for a conference if you see peers and colleagues who are attending the conference. So this is another way people are driving additional registrants. The other way, by the way, that's more conventional is exhibitor invites, which is a company, and again, not endorsing, just saying what they do, and others is offer tools for exhibitors to invite their networks to come to conferences. So I'm just going to go, because there is a question that's come out here, which is how old, this is back to the Pfizer virtual exhibit. How old is it? What was the result of the virtual exhibit? I don't have the results on that, so I can't speak to that, and I do believe it was a number of years ago. That said, it is something that we watch and we've seen in other places where people are creating that virtual presence in addition to their physical presence. So to the question that was posed there, on social registration, something worth considering if you're trying to drive additional registrants and you want to use the attendee registration to convert people into attendees. Now, I'm going to push the bar, and that is the goal here, and share with you a couple of examples of how people are going to social and increasing their contacts and connections. So this is a sponsorship offered by Navy League, and Navy League has a history of doing some really innovative sponsorships. It's not in the medical space, but it's indicative of the innovative thinking that we're starting to see out there. And I'll give you another example of the social space. But on Navy League, what they do is they take their landing page on Facebook, and in the 12 weeks prior to show open, Navy League allows a sponsor to occupy that landing page, the picture, the thumbnail, and the message for 1 day a week for 12 weeks prior to show open. And this is a $10,000 sponsorship. I mention this in part because I feel like in social, and let me be the first to admit, there are some audiences from some of the people on this webinar that are not on social. So if they're not on social, I'm not telling you to get on social. But if you have different audiences that are on social, the administrators, the technologists, sometimes the nurses, depending upon what role they have, some of the nutritionists, then really think innovatively about what's going on in social. And there are a couple dynamics here. One, what social tools are they using? Where are they going to obtain information? Two, what are they asking about? What are they talking about? And last week I was in Washington, D.C. with two big data specialists at a conference that I was speaking at. And one of the big data specialists I've been working with for some time now talked about mining all of the conversation that's taking place prior to show open. What words are they using? What topics are they touching on? What things are they excited about? And then using your own positioning as an exhibitor or your own content as an organizer to promote some of the different solutions or some of the different offers that you have at the conference that touches into those areas of interest. So my last comment, by the way, about social is if you haven't undertaken a social listening program on the conference, whether you're the association or you're the exhibitor, undertake some social listening. In other words, what is the traffic? When does the traffic peak leading up to show open? So there's one show that we go to every year, which is Exhibitor Live. Some of you are probably familiar with it. Exhibitor Live opens their show usually in March. This year will be late February. And one of the things I learned from a session I went to a couple of years ago was that Exhibitor Live hits a peak of social conversation in October when they publish their educational programming. And last year we undertook to do a social campaign around that peak traffic. And so it is important for you when you do have highly social events to understand where those peaks happen. Yes, they happen when Reg launches. That's a small peak. Yes, it happens on the early bird deadline. But oftentimes where there's a launch of the keynote or launch of the educational program, those can also be social peaks. and take advantage of those peaks. And or if you're the association, you may want to think about even monetizing those peaks because you know there's a high amount of conversation taking place at those times. Live streaming. So if you haven't used Facebook Live yet, I strongly encourage it. But more to the point, I strongly urge everyone here to encourage your attendees to go live with Facebook, with Instagram, or with Snapchat. I went live with Facebook last night, not on a professional affair. I sing in a choir, and we're getting ready for the Jewish holidays, and so we went live last night. We had 27 people around the world watching our rehearsal. And you know, it's small numbers, but it's also a small choir. But my point is that your attendees and your staff can project your image well beyond the confines of the physical event, and it doesn't take much. And I'm not telling you that this is a replacement for actual live streaming, the quality of live streaming, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But what I am telling you is that people are looking for what's being shared. They're looking for what's cool. They're looking for what's informative. And by having the attendees at your event cheering, that generates buzz and enthusiasm and gets people excited and may and oftentimes will lead to folks wanting to come and be a part of the action the next time. So we've gone through a lot on digital, not everything. There's, you know, a couple other trends happening there with retargeting ads and, you know, having those online conversations, but, you know, some things to think about here. Now I want to shift to remote connections. And there's going to be some overlap between this and the regulatory trends, as some of you know, with some of the regulations that are coming into effect. But a couple of things. One, people are compressed for time, as you can tell, and budget and attention. There is more scrutiny on physicians attending unfunded trips. And let's face it, there is concern about geopolitics, and there's concern about traveling across the world. Ironically, I was in Europe in February of this year and was in Belgium on my way back to the States, and I happened to bump into some folks. They were, I want to say, anthropologists, and they were going to a conference in Baltimore, and what struck me in our conversation was the number of their colleagues that refused to come to the United States because of concerns over their status or concerned over geopolitics. So will that lead to falling off a cliff? Not clear. I don't think it's going to have that dramatic an effect, but we are seeing people that are now hedging and wondering whether it's best to stay close to their practice. And, you know, access to the campus has never been closer with technology. So, yeah, most people will attend, but I think it's important to have that remote strategy. And what do I mean by that? So we're going to talk through some of these trends, but some initiatives to consider. Flipped learning, and we're going to talk about what that is in a minute. It can be done pre and post, but generally done pre. Webinars for attendee acquisition and remote learning. So many people do webinars today. The question is, to what extent are we using that information towards attendee acquisition or additional connections? At the event, there's a slew of ideas here, right? From live streaming the keynote, recording content, so that many AV providers, ourselves included, now can provide solutions which match the slide advancement from sessions to the audio. And that way you don't have to bring crews in to live stream sessions directly. You can offer the Q&A WebEx chat. You can live stream docent tours of the show hall. Think about sponsoring the e-poster demonstrations or Q&A of speakers and key opinion leaders. And then you can see some of the similar initiatives posts in addition to a daily wrap and comments. So let's talk about flip sessions for a second. And I'm going to ask you to write something down and look it up when you get a minute, and that's Khan Academy. Khan Academy is spelled K-H-A-N, has nothing to do with our industry and everything to do with it. Khan Academy is a philosophy around learning, and it started with math in classrooms. And the philosophy was that children who go to class on a given day and are taught a principle and need to practice it and to master it are challenged to do that in such a compressed time period. And what Khan Academy did is set up a series of videos to teach kids the math concept and have them practice the concept. The teacher then can see the practice the kids are undertaking and segment the kids into three groups. Those kids who've mastered the concept, those kids who are mastering the concept, and those kids who are struggling to master the concept. The kids who master the concept, when they arrive at the classroom, are given more challenging materials to push their thinking. The kids who are mastering the concept are given materials to reinforce their knowledge, and the kids who are struggling are then given teacher attention to help with their mastery. Now, let's move into our world. AON is perioperative nurses, And they had 2 sessions, happened to be sponsored, where the speakers provided materials prior to the conference on a website that was obviously, it was sponsored, but what they would allow people to do is see these videos and learn this content prior to coming to the conference. A couple of benefits here. One, as a speaker, you never have enough time to share the materials you'd like to, and you can never get to a depth that might seem satisfactory. These flip session learning allows you to get a higher or a deeper level of detail to your attendees. Secondly, I've had some comments from people that I've talked to, particularly in, I'll call it the medical vet dental space, which is a number of folks will do labs. And what they have mentioned to me is that it would be great to do flip session learning on, quote, chapter 1 of my lab session. And that way, when people come to the lab, they get straight into the hands-on practical as opposed to doing the upfront. So it's a really interesting way to think about how to use that flipped learning in concert with the session. Also, I'd be neglectful if I didn't mention from an association standpoint, it's a great attendee acquisition tool. Here is some free content that you can use. Speaker gets additional exposure, and you get those contacts that you can then use to convert into attendees. Now, there are other technologies. This isn't the only one, although I see this more often than others, which is telepresence robots. This allows attendees through appointed hours to literally go online and see and interact with attendees using both the robotics moving around the show floor as well as the screens where you can talk to people. It's very cool. Can't say you can do it for hundreds of people, but it can be a way to connect remote attendees into the show floor. Hybrid events. So hybrid events combining live and online, again, it expands your audience reach. It can improve retention and learning through video. It builds online visibility. And just like this webinar, obviously, these events, you can record the content and post the content later to keep the connection with your attendees. Webcasting, another version of connecting the remote attendee into the event. One of the things that's tricky about some of these tools is that when you're live streaming, not everybody can sit down and pay attention during those sessions. So when you're webcasting and providing rebroadcasts, you're able to capture more audience. And we know from social media that not everybody is watching or tuning in at the same time. So the ability to rebroadcast that content and collect the information from those remote attendees keeps you connected to those folks, and particularly the folks who are remote, who are less likely to attend. Now, e-poster solutions. So this isn't a technology talk. This is a remote connections section. But what's interesting, and this has been a very, very hot topic. I don't know if it's probably the top 5 in the industry today, which is particularly those who have posters. They're wondering about all this real estate. They're wondering about the paper posters. They're wondering about all the hassle. And we've seen a number of savvy e-poster solutions. And I just want to remind you that once those posters are available online, 2 dynamics can occur. One, viewers can rate the posters and can tag the posters for different subjects for easy viewability and search capability. And second, those posters live well beyond the conference. Now we know from the management of the conference that it's important that people regulate when the posters become available. So it's done at the opening of the conference, but being able to have those posters live 3 months afterwards is a major paradigm shift from what we have today, which is you put the posters up in printed paper and you pull them back down. Here you can also see on this landing page in the bottom right-hand corner, literally folks who are securing sponsorships on the online posters. And this is just another view of that screen. So we're going to shift from being digital and remote to the Internet of Things. And this is an interesting dynamic here where, are we at the aggressive growth curve? We're still in early days, but I think it's important to talk about the Internet of Things because it is changing how people access and organize their lives, access information, organize their lives. So 4 different trends here: personalized, customized, connecting people to virtual intelligent systems, and accessing information everywhere. Sorry, before I do that, someone did ask me, would you anticipate that we will see an increase of telepresence used within a booth space, bringing specialists into the booth space to reduce travel costs? I think you're going to see this on a selective basis. I think if it's a specialist from your company that makes a difference with attendees, that's something you're going to want, that personalized presence. But where you've got specialists that are torn between commitments out in the field and going to an event, you can now use the telepresence technology to bring them in virtually. Someone, by the way, did ask me, Facebook seems old. Are people really using it? And I would just say that Facebook is still, in fact, they are still on an aggressive trajectory of use, particularly on the sharing of content. So the growth has slowed on number of users, but growth continue to get increased on usability of Facebook. So with just those 2 questions, let me come back to the Internet of Things. And I don't know, by the way, I'm interested to see if anybody's familiar with this tool called X.AI. So I've been using X.AI for the last 6 months, and it is a virtual assistant. And I have an assistant who is invaluable. So this is not diminishing her role. But what I use X.AI to do is, if I send an email to someone and if I tell the person I'd like to meet with them, we'd like to do a 30-minute meeting, and here are the topics of the meeting, the X.AI is a virtual assistant that will find free time for us to meet and schedule the meeting autonomously. So you no longer have the back and forth of emails to figure out when's a convenient time. The system will look at the 2 different calendars and recommend times to meet. There is a human being behind it, and I've seen that happen where if sometimes my message or the response to my message is asking for clarification. If the system cannot read or understand that, after 3 tries, then it goes to a human who then intercedes. Now, I have had that happen. I can't say this is a perfect system, but the reason why I've been working with it is that I'm intrigued by this idea that we can have an assistant find a time to make a meeting. And one of the things we all struggle with is, how can I connect with the target audience? How can I schedule a meeting without having to make 14 phone calls and deal with 8 other emails and then trying to find a time and then a place to meet, as opposed to having someone do that for me? The other piece, admittedly, is the person who supports me is incredibly talented and valuable, and there are so many other things I would love for her to do to help me, and I'm not sure scheduling meetings is the most value add, although, truth be told, there are some times where just coordinating the different moving people here has been very valuable, and X.AI has not quite done it. So I'm not there to say this is perfect, but I'm here to tell you that virtual assistants and platforms like X.AI, they're here now. They're going to grow. We know this from the trajectory of intellectual property rights that people have requested. And there are going to be opportunities for us to use our time more efficiently prior to the conference. Similarly, Echo, Alexa, all these different tools. I think the key message behind this is, whether you're an exhibitor or corporate member or whether you're an association, it's so critical to make sure your information is accessible and understandable from verbal as opposed to just written. Because many people now are standing or sitting away from a device and away from their laptop and asking questions. And the question for you is, how accessible is your information? How easy is it for the system to find and then communicate? Because this is where we're going to see rapid growth of people using these systems and asking simple questions. And if the net cannot find the simple answer, you're going to be at a disadvantage, because that's how people are going to want to absorb information. Similarly, mass personalization. So this is something that we've been looking at for some time now, and we see this happening on the floor. I'm giving you the car example, which is not the most relevant to an event, but we see this geo-messaging or geo-targeting happening at events as people walk into the convention center. As they walk around the show floor, we've got some associations like the Diving Association and the American Library Association that are using beacons. Beacons are nodes that communicate with Bluetooth, and they can send geo-based messaging about what's ahead or what's coming in your path. So they're placed geostrategically to convey messages and engage people. And I think we're going to see more of this. I think from an association or exhibitor standpoint, we got to be careful on how many beacons and how many messages. We'll see some billboards, by the way, or some graphics that will be more personalized messages based on the attendee. We're going to see that type of technology. And so that's where we're going to see a much more smarter, personalized experience, so that it feels like we're speaking to that individual as opposed to speaking to all the folks who are passing by at that time. So we've gone through a number of technologies. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I just want to make sure there are a lot of things that go on in the regulatory space. There are two I want to touch on today that I think it's critical for you to be thinking about. I was talking earlier to the folks at HCEA, and this first one I will tell you, we've gone from DEFCON 3 to DEFCON 4, if it gives you any sense of how important it is to us at GES and beyond, and that is GDPR. So GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. It provides EU citizens greater control over their personal data and assurances that information is being securely protected across Europe, regardless, and this is the key words, regardless of whether the data processing takes place in the EU or not. So one could look at this and say, geez, I don't have any events in the EU, or I'm not responsible for communications to the EU. But here is the critical thing. If you have European, broadly defined, because even with Brexit, the British authorities have also embraced the GDPR in their own language. If you have any European, and it's likely to expand to other areas, that you still need to be compliant with GDPR regulations and protections. This law will come into effect on May 28, 2018. I am going to spend a few extra minutes walking through some of the key facets of this, and I'm hoping that you are familiar with this. So I would love to see, by the way, I'm looking at chat here. Tell me if you are. I'm kind of interested to know how many of you are working on plans to address GDPR as I talk through this. So I know there are 28 of you. Let's see if I can get like 28 responses to the how prepared are you for GDPR. GDPR provides and outlines 9 rights for citizens of the EU regarding data collection. I'm gonna read through these through I have two or three white papers that I've been using to really understand this, and so I'm happy to share those with you if you want to drop me an email at the end. First, consent has to be given. Businesses may not process the personal information of individuals unless they've been freely given a specific, informed, and unambiguous indication of consent, either by a statement or by a clear affirmative action. An email, according to some of the FAQs that I've read, an affirmative email does work, but people now need to explicitly opt in. That means when you're interacting with them and collecting information, scanning a badge, that they need to explicitly opt in to receive communications with you. It cannot be that they can opt out. Right to access, number 2, this provides individuals with the right to request access to their personal data and to how their data is used by the company after it has been gathered. The company must provide a copy of the personal data free of charge in an electronic format if the individual requests it. Number 3, the right to be forgotten. If consumers are no longer customers, or if they withdraw their consent for a company to use their personal data, then they have the right to have their data deleted. Number 4, the right to data portability. Individuals have a right to transfer their data from one service provider to another, and it must happen in a commonly used and machine-readable format. Number 5, the right to be informed. This covers any gathering of data by companies and the fact that individuals must be informed before data is gathered. Customers have to opt in for their data to be gathered, and consent must be freely given rather than implied. So if you think about the registration forms that we have for our events, you think about the scanning that we're doing, it is an explicit right to provide that data or collect that data. The right to have information corrected. This ensures that individuals can have their data updated if it's out of date or incomplete. The right to restrict processing. Individuals can request that their data is not used for processing. The record can remain in place but not be used. Number 8, the right to object includes the right to stop processing the data for direct marketing. There are no exemptions to this rule, and any processing must stop as soon as the request is received. Similarly, this right must be made clear to individuals at the very start of any communication. And the right to be notified. And this is important. Obviously, there have been a lot of breaches. We know about the Equifax breach that happened recently, and there's a really important stipulation here. If there has been a data breach, which comprises an individual's personal data, then the individual is entitled to be notified within 72 hours of first having become aware of the breach. So some really key points, and it is critical to have the plans in place by May 28th of next year. And some of the recommendations in terms of improving or being prepared and being compliant with GDPR, mapping your company's data, knowing where all the personal data in your entire business comes from, where and how you store the information, and document what you do with the data. Identify exactly where the data resides, who can access it, and if there are any risks to the data. So this isn't just the data research division at our companies. It's if we're collecting regs, collecting education data, collecting scans, where's that data residing? Determine what data you're going to keep. Don't keep more information than necessary. Get rid of data that isn't used. If your business collects a lot of data without any relevant purpose or need, you won't be able to do this in a GDPR world. GDPR will encourage a more disciplined treatment of personal data. So really ask yourself, why are we saving all this data? What are you trying to achieve by collecting these categories of personal information? And is there financial gain of deleting this information greater than saving it? Number 3, putting security measures in place. Make sure you have safeguards for your infrastructure to help contain any data breaches. This means putting security measures in place to guard against data breaches and taking quick action to notify individuals and authorities in the event a breach does occur. Number 4, reviewing documentation. Individuals have to explicitly consent to the acquisition processing of their data. Pre-checked boxes and implied consent will not be acceptable anymore. You'll have to review all privacy statements and disclosures and make sure they're adjusted if needed. Number 5, establishing procedures for handling personal data. You'll need to establish policies and procedures for things like how can individuals give consent in a legal manner? What's the process if an individual wants to have their data deleted? How do you ensure it's done across all platforms and systems and it's really deleted? If an individual wants data to be transferred, how will you do it? And how you confirm that the person who requests to have their data transferred is the person they say they are. And finally, if you're storing and using personal data as part of the business, or your company employs more than 250 people, you should appoint a data protection officer. That would be someone with experience and expertise protecting data and deep understanding of the EU data protection regulation. They should be a great communicator and skilled in using their understanding to develop and implement concrete data protection practices. So I've gone through a fair amount of detail on GDPR. I'm hoping that most of you are monitoring and have people and resources in place to address it. The deadline for the regulation to be effective is May 25th, 2018. And while that seems like it's pretty far away, if you have multiple databases or data collection, and I think we all do, it's critical to start now on preparing for GDPR. The last regulatory change I want to mention, I noticed from the list that a number of you were at the annual meeting for HCEA this year. Some of you weren't, and I just want to make sure you're aware of the MedTech and APAC Med changes. Now, I'm gonna do a little promotion here for HCEA because I thought they put together a very good white paper that was released in the last 7 days on ethical MedTech and APAC Med code changes, proposed changes, and the impact on ACME accreditation. And HCEA right now is facilitating a dialogue and getting a dialogue together between ethical MedTech and APAC Med as well as ACME. The MedTech changes, and this was a session that was held at HCEA. It's something HCEA is actively involved with, but there are changes going into effect January 1st, that there will be no more direct financial support to individual ACPs to attend third-party events, and the need to publicly disclose educational grants provided to healthcare organizations. In addition, for ethical MedTech, events now need to register either their understanding and compliance with the new standards and their event to ensure that it complies with general criteria for events. And I just had a small blurb I wanted to read here. All CP, this is, for example, all events with HCPs must take place in appropriate locations and venues with reasonable hospitality, no guests or spouses. A broader category sponsorship will require approval on the conference vetting system, which is provisioning educational grants, promotional activity, and booths. Now, these changes are running into some conflict with the current ACCME standards, and I'm happy to say that HCEA is working on your behalf to see if we can make sure there's coordination between the ethical MedTech and APAC Med and ACCME. On APAC Med, you can see no direct financial support to individual healthcare providers or selecting healthcare providers to attend a third-party event. So if you're not familiar with these changes, I do encourage you can send a note to me, or you can send it to the leadership team at HCEA. We can send you the white paper, and it would be great just to note your interest so that as we learn more and get updates, we can provide that to you. One other kind of word of note before you press the panic button. The biggest change here has to do with the funding of healthcare providers, particularly from Europe and Asia. and that is typically provided by healthcare exhibitors. If you are running an event that has very few, if any, attendees that are funded by the exhibitors, if you have none that are funded by exhibitors, there's no issue. If you have some or a couple that are funded by exhibitors, yes, there is something you need to look at, and you may have to look at the trade-offs between putting the measures into place to address this standard versus, maybe just saying that you just can't allow these folks to be funded any further. They'll have to pay their own way to come to the event. So a lot of changes going on with these different associations. It's a foreshadowing of some other things that are probably on the horizon. And I think it's just critical that if you haven't registered with MedTech, your event, if you haven't worked with your exhibitors on the funding of HCPs, that you either get a copy of the white paper and or you contact the HCEA leadership team, and we can help you navigate through these changes. At the same time, we're trying to get final clarification in coordination with the ACCME. Our final topic today is on the intelligent event. And here, one of the key issues that really has come to light, and I think it's a very acute issue, is that organizers are literally sitting on tons and tons of data that could be mined and used for great insights for the exhibitors and for the attendees. And it's time to provide more of a curated experience and recommendations, as well as help deliver on exhibitor ROI. Most importantly, it's critical to collect and share intelligence throughout the event. We're seeing more revolutionized mobile solutions, whether it's using text messaging, using data mining to help the attendees understand where their peers are going and what they're doing and how they can get a more informed and engaging and valuable experience. Curated attendee experiences. We're seeing new tools today. Now, this is a platform, what you're looking at, called E180, which allows attendees to make offers to meet with other attendees. There are other technologies. There's Poken, interactive technology, or PixMob, and there's Proxfinity for more informal gatherings or symposia. All of these are intending to either run algorithms to match attendees together or to allow attendees to make offers and take offers with other attendees. So I think the key here is, if you're looking to help accelerate the networking, meaningful networking of the meeting, there are new platforms to help you do that. And you don't need to be the organizer to do this. We do have exhibiting companies who are using some of these technologies to interact more and share more of their expertise and the insights with the attendees and connect attendees to each other or to other valuable key opinion leaders at the meeting. When it comes to the exhibitors, we're seeing a shift to providing greater awareness of and intelligence on the success they're having at the meeting. The example I'm going to share with you is not healthcare, but there is a lot of work being done in the space, and we're doing a lot of work in the space on really helping the exhibitors define, measure, and demonstrate success. So this is a collaboration that was done with UBM and our business, UBM, the registration company, and the intelligence part of our business, really looking at what are the goals of the exhibitors, what are they trying to achieve and who they're trying to speak with. And so after collecting information on what are the companies what's the background of the company, and what are your objectives for being at the event, and then defining what are the types of companies or individuals that you seek to meet. It's using that input from the exhibitors to then provide insights on the success. In this particular example, it was also understanding what type of pre-show marketing activities they intended to undertake. So in the past, we've always said, hey, exhibitor, here's a booth space, good luck, and I hope it works. And the exhibitors get scans, they have meetings, they have measurables, but they're the ones who have all the information about what their goals are and how well they're meeting the goals, and they're the ones making the determination as to whether it's successful or not. We're seeing this new collaborative model where the organizer is trying to understand what the exhibitor is achieving and monitoring those successes. So in this case, running this objective survey to get their input on why they're attending the event, what they hope to achieve, and then providing valuable reporting on how they're doing. Now, this happens to be a lead show. Not every show is a lead show, obviously, and sometimes it has to do with the type of physician or the type of practice they're in. But in this case, This is a post-event report. It's one page, double-sided. There's a overall overview section, which is the section behind the picture I'm showing you. This picture now shows the number of scans by this particular exhibitor, the average scans for all exhibitors at the event, and the average scans for 3 of the most relevant subsegments of exhibitors at the event. So now I can understand my scans against the show average against 3 relevant subsegments. There's no disclosure of any one of my competitors, but I can see on a relative basis how I'm doing. In addition, if you look at the bottom right-hand chart, I now know how many total visitors met certain registration attributes at the event and how long they spent on the show floor. If you look at the third column in from the right, it compares my scans at my booth of people with these attributes against the total visitors, which is the third column in from the left. In addition, in the chart behind the Achieve High Quality Leads chart is an analysis that was conducted to benchmark the incremental performance of exhibitors who undertook additional show presence. In other words, if I had a large stand or an open stand, if I had a speaker session or a theater sponsorship, what would be my incremental leads that I would achieve by having those different types of participation in the event? So now we're not only saying how I did, which is what every exhibitor sees, what I can also understand is if I change the presence, the participation I have in the event, how will that affect my results? Likewise, we looked at a visual environmental audit of the booth to understand how well they, what their presence was, and we evaluate on 7 different dimensions, and then conduct an exit survey to understand for attendees which logos they recalled, and of the ones they recalled, which of those logos had they already planned to meet with. In other words, the first question about recall is unprompted. Who do you remember? The second question is, okay, of the ones you remembered, which are the ones you are going to see anyway? There's also on the bottom left-hand corner some benchmarking on social media activity. The point being here is looking at brand awareness and brand presence and drawing a link between performance at the convention and the different activities and the effectiveness of the presence and the recall of the attendees. There are other questions, by the way. These aren't the only questions to ask, but another question is, did you learn something new at this exhibitor? And if so, are you likely to give their products or their offerings more consideration in the future? So there are a variety of different types of questions that can be asked. But from an association standpoint, if you're offering the event, you want to reduce attrition, you want to understand what it's going to take to be successful, this is a tool and a methodology to get you there. And as an exhibitor, this gives you an assurance that your participation in the event, this organizer is really trying to think about your needs and your effectiveness, as opposed to the hoping and praying. We gave you booth space, we hope it works out. The tools that I'm talking about also give us better attendee insights and connections. So as these technologies, interactive technologies increase, what you're looking at on the left-hand side, and this is real data from an event, this looks at different individuals at that event, where you've got admin Edward, manager Mark, physician Diana, and you're looking at the percentages. So the percentage that is in black, where you see the 23% under Diana and 34% under Mark, that means that 23% of the interactions Diana had at the conference were with other physicians, and 34% of the interactions manager Mark had were with other managers. You can see there's a 42% from admin Edward in blue going towards manager Mark. There's an 11% going from manager Mark to admin Edward. In other words, 42% of the admins interacted with managers, and 11% of the managers interacted with the admin. So you're starting to see, when people say, like, I'm going to this meeting, who am I going to interact with? We've got better insights, who you're going to interact with. We have great insights on which which specialties are attending which educational sessions, what networking do they go to, what theaters do they go to, what theater sessions do they go to. So that provides insights on the right-hand side where we can make recommendations. Here are the people you should meet. Here are the sessions you should go to. Here's the content that may be of interest with you. And in some of these technologies, whether you go to these sessions or meet these people, you can also identify those people you didn't meet, those sessions you did not go to that you should go to, or upcoming webinars you should participate in because of the interests or the types of activities you participated in the show. So a lot in there about intelligence. I think the bottom line is that the era of the data mining and intelligence and recommendations is right here, right now. And we're really, really excited about it. I mean, I'm a data guy. I'm at my desk, and I can tell you, I got my little thing on my desk that says, "In God we trust, all others bring data." And I believe in it. I'm not saying that data is the only answer, but you know, it is something that is really key that we're sitting on this data, is harnessing it for intelligent recommendations and intelligent insights for success. So I've given you a lot to chew on here, and I got a couple of minutes here. I'm happy to take Q&A, so if you have questions, please do type them into chat. And while we look for that, I'm going to just promote a couple of things here on behalf of HCEA. If you happen to be in San Diego for the American College of Surgeons Clinical Congress, if you live in LA, if you're in the San Diego area, heck, if you're in Las Vegas or Chicago and looking to get out of the you know, the cold weather or just the heat of Vegas, go to San Diego. Meet us on October 23rd from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Marriott Marquis, which is right adjacent to the Convention Center, where we're going to have an HCA meetup. These have been very, very successful networking sessions, and it's being a great place to share your perspectives and gain new ideas. So we strongly urge you to join us on Monday, October 23rd in San Diego. Likewise, HCEA has recently launched a new event coming up in February of next year. Sunday, February 25th from 1 o'clock to 5:30 p.m. I will be there, and I am very excited. And this is a new experience and networking event, as well as we've been looking at the different speakers in the session. This will not be boring panels. It will not be lectures. This will be engaging, inspirational speakers, a mix of short and long, all interactive, and a very productive afternoon. It also happens to be the day before Exhibitor Live. If you're not familiar with Exhibitor Live, it is one of the most successful events for corporate exhibitors that stretches well beyond the medical space. What's very exciting about this particular event is that HCA Innovate will be an exclusive gathering for companies that are in the healthcare and medical services space. And then you have the opportunity to stay for Monday, and you can see and you can participate in other educational classes and go to the show floor, which is very dynamic and very interactive. So, you know, I know I have to put a push. I'm a board member. I'm excited. These are great things. So February 25th, October 23rd, I want to see you there. I'm going to see you there. And I don't see any questions coming on the transom here. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for staying with me through the hour. I'm going to give you 2 minutes back. I wish you a great day, and look forward to any questions or any ideas and sharing that you do in the future. Many thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, David, for being with us today. We hope to see everybody at our upcoming meetup at ACS and the HCA Innovate in February. Just a reminder, today's presentation is being recorded, and recordings and slide deck will be made available along with a follow-up survey tomorrow via email. Please just take a few minutes to share your feedback with us, and don't forget to include potential topics for future webinars. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining us.